They're very, very lifelong fans. They do not change. So if you're a Zetici fan, you don't change because Zetici's had a bad couple of games or a bad couple of years. It's in your blood, and you keep it there forever. And they support you through thick and thin. They sing and they yell and they scream and they whistle, but mostly they sing and they chant. And you have to know all those things if you're going to be a fan of the team. In every organization, they've got their battle cries, and you've got to be invested to be a fan over here.
It feels sehr good. The spelers spielt sehr good for the playoffs. I'm very happy for them. It's so wonderful to see all these young guys and all these veteran players, just how happy they are to win. And it's been a long time since I've won, but again, I realize now how much importance there is to be a player and to win.
I've studied that team quite a bit just because I like history, and I like the history of the McFarlands. And I've talked to my dad a lot about what made that team special and why they were good.
Floyd was really the pillar for the whole thing. I mean, he came and he knew everybody. And he knew where there were players, and he knew the players that might be good fits for the team. So he was able to get the guys that got together, that won the Allen Cup, and then they were able to parlay that into the World Championship.
I followed them like you couldn't. We were so proud. I think a lot of people don't realize how proud we were of the Belleville McFarlands back then. They were. There was to win the Allen Cup and go over there and win the goal. It was unbelievable, and it's too bad that people don't remember that. People my age remember, because they were great hockey players out there. They'd all be making about $10 million a year right about now.
Yeah, it's the stuff of folklore. It's the stuff of legend.
Living up in Belleville under what Floyd had basically accomplished as a hockey player was something that we didn't really take notice at the beginning. More, we appreciated it as we grew up, and when we ventured off into our different field.
I could only imagine, but you'd go to the Belleville Memorial Arena, and they'd be, the place would be packed, 2,200 people watching some pretty good hockey players.
In that league and the senior league, there was guys playing there would be stars in the National Hockey League now.
I was aware that it was a very happy time, a very joyous time in their lives. There was a lot of, people coming in and out of the house, get-togethers, parties. They were very close, the team. They were all best friends, the guys on the team. And so we were always visiting each other and doing things together.
As time goes on, you start to realize how important that team was. And then you find out that your father played for Canada, and you're like, wow, he played for Canada? That's amazing. So then you start to hear everything, and then these guys continually coming over.
We grew and understood what Floyd was all about and what they had accomplished with the Belleville McFarlands.
He wasn't a glory days type of guy that would sit back and talk about, how great it was. But, he was certainly proud of that, very proud of those group of men. And, having grown up here and having, been coached by some of them and having lots of interaction with them over the years, the guys that stayed here, they had a tremendous impact on this community.
I knew that there was something special about what he did from a very young age, and of course as I got older and started to understand more than I really did, recognize the accomplishments, especially of that McFarland team, which were truly remarkable.
Well, my father was always very determined and ambitious. I remember him telling me when he was a young child, deciding that, he wanted to be a hockey player. He's from Toronto, and he would go down to Christie Pitts, where they have the big outdoor rinks, or at least they had at the time, and watch, when he was just little, watch the hockey players playing outdoors there. And he was so fascinated by it. He said, I want to do that.
He tried out for a team in Toronto. When he got there was over 150 kids that were there to play for a junior B team. And he said that there's no way he was going to get cut from this team. And how they did their tryouts were they would line up 3 guys at once, go to a rush, and shoot the puck at the goalie. And if he pointed to you, you went back in the line. And if he didn't point to you, you got off the ice. And my father said he never got pointed to until about the 4th rush. He just kept coming back in. He got cut 3 times, just kept coming back in. And finally I said, you, over there, finally. So, and then because of that, he ended up making that team. So it's amazing how he just wouldn't take no for an answer.
Floyd was a rock. He didn't take any prisoners. He was an extremely steady defenseman.
Had the NHL have been 20 teams when my father was playing, people would have talked to him along the lines that they talk about a Brian Sutter. Just the ultimate team player. Whatever it took to win, whatever it took to compete, it was going to happen.
I didn't work in the mines, but I think it was just the same thing. And no, you appreciated it, eh? And you had that give you character. I mean, think about working in the mines, and you got a break playing hockey. I mean, you'd play your heart out to play.
Floyd was what I like to say, a ferocious competitor. He loved to compete, loved to win, and he understood the work that it took, and he understood what it did for a person as a human being outside of the rink or off the playing field too.
That's why the Crawford family was like that.
I knew my dad was pretty special in hockey circles from a very young age. He was coaching senior hockey. Those are my earliest recollections. He was coaching the old Mohawks, and we used to get to go on a road trip every now and then.
He had that level of competitiveness that no matter what, the game was never over. And even within that game, he was thinking about the next time we play this team, we're going to take the lessons that we learned in this game. So, and that's stuck with me.
There was no compromising with Floyd. That's the way it was, and I'm eternally thankful for it because they were valuable lessons. He was a very demanding coach, but he wouldn't. We always thought it was about the score with Floyd, and it wasn't until years later you realized that the score had nothing to do with it.
He definitely had a passion, and he when you love something, you want to talk about it all the time, right? Because you want to share that, that knowledge. So that was a constant. It was a constant. There was always something brewing in his head.
He used to use his psychology on me and say, hey, you really look good out there today, Peter. Your team only got beat by 14 goals, but my God, you look good. You were only responsible for 7 of those goals. And that's the kind of psychology he'd use. And, you know, even though I would kind of shrug it off and say to myself, yeah, you're not going to get to me, it got to me, because when he left the room, I was like, oh, I'll show him, you know.
There was always lessons, but it was always sports and, well, life too, but through sport you learn a lot about life, you know, teamwork and defeat and, you know, camaraderie, all kinds of things like that. But sitting at the kitchen table every night for dinner, and the salt, the pepper, the ketchup, they were all, this is your defenseman, this is the centerman, and he was going through plays with the guys.
He instilled in all of us a really good level of competitiveness. He instilled in us accountability. And, you know, I think some of the earliest memories that I have of the accountability part of it would be, my dad would never get angry with us if you missed a net or you didn't score a goal or something like that. But when you didn't compete, boy, he didn't like that.
He was a big believer in you're as good as your last practice or your last game, and that's the motivation to keep coming back and try and better yourself.
My father wasn't the kind of person that talked about himself, right? There were no trophies. You know, the gold medal was, and probably still is, in a drawer somewhere. You know, it wasn't, he wanted, you know, to be accepted for what he was doing right then, and for us to, you know, looking back, to carve our own path, not to live through him.
You know, we started to see that we'd get some recognition in maybe the Intelligencer or on local radio or stuff like that. And like any kid, you know, you'd feel good about yourself. And my dad would always say, you can't eat those newspaper clippings. You got to have cornflakes on the table. So, you know, I didn't understand it at the time, but I understand what he meant now. You know, you can't rest on your laurels. You always have to continue to keep working. You always have to answer the next challenge.
Floyd kind of sat back and watched everything develop. And he'd prod, you know, and poke every once in a while to say, hey, stand up for yourself, kid. Your brother's over there making a fool of you. You know, he wouldn't say it directly, but he'd make you think.
And I say this with the utmost respect. I can honestly say, I spent a year of my life hating the man's guts, and the rest of my life loving him like a father. You know, Floyd was a little bit ahead of us, and we didn't always get the message, and that didn't stop from delivering it. And he delivered it in spades, and eventually you start to get it.
I think Floyd's favorite line with me is, oh, so you think you can, eh? Huh. Okay. Sure you can, you know, and that's the way he found, just like a good coach. You got to find what makes a person tick, what makes an athlete want to perform to the best of their ability.
My father was basically going to realize his dream of going to the National Hockey League back in the 6-team league. He was part of the Montreal Canadiens organization. He was playing in Chicoutimi for the Chicoutimi Saguenayens of the Quebec Senior League, and my father had been told he was going to play for 3 games, and my understanding was he was at practice that day, and he was quite excited about his boyhood dream coming to fruition, or almost there. He was just going at it a little bit too hard and hit a goalpost, and his shoulder had to be operated on, and crushed basically his dream of playing the NHL.
And so he was sent to hospital, and my mother was, I believe, the only bilingual nurse on staff. So she was more or less assigned to, you know, his case, and that's how they met, and things evolved from there.
He said he never got his NHL contract, but he got his $1 million contract when he married my mother.
My mother's very strong-willed. My father's very strong-willed. And yeah, so you got to hear some interesting conversations.
There's lots of love there, obviously, but they they, couldn't think of two more fiery backgrounds, like an Irishman and a hot-blooded French Canadian.
Sometimes, he got knocked down and traded to a different team and whatnot, but he always had his mother or my mother beside him, encouraging him and making sure that there was food on the table, and always there was.
It all started with Floyd coming to town and saying, hey, I like this town, and let's win. And they put together a winner. I think it all starts there. So I think they really, the family, starting with Floyd and Pauline, really created Belleville as a viable hockey town in the future.
My parents were fantastic ambassadors in the city, and my mother especially was always telling us and making sure that we were towing the line and going to school and going to church so often, and sometimes we didn't go to church. We'd have a little fun with that, but we always managed to not embarrass my mother too much.
My dad and mom have always said Belleville's a great place to raise kids, and it really is.
I think that there was a sense of, real strong sense of community. I know that they both mentioned that there'd been a lot of places, hockey had taken them a lot of places, but they felt home that when they were here.
It was noisy. Very noisy, obviously, because I was the eldest girl. I was a girl. And then after that, there were 6 boys in a row. Then my sister was born, and then another brother a few years later. Peter, Michael, Bobby, Mark, Louis, Todd, Danielle, and then Eric. Oh, and myself.
It was hectic. It was always something happening.
Structured chaos, basically. It's a big family, obviously.
Okay, we were always involved in various sporting activities. My brothers obviously played hockey, but we would just be busy, very, very chaotic. In and out, in and out, in and out.
Can you imagine what dinner was like around their house?
It was always entertaining around the kitchen table. We had our rules, our hidden rules. We had rules for whose seat was, nobody could sit in the seat in the front room to watch the, 12 by 12 black and white TV.
There was 4 of us in a bedroom. Bunk beds. It was just chaos, basically, from the time you woke up to the time you went to bed.
If you had to leave the room for whatever reason, whether it was to answer the phone or get in trouble by your father, you had to say something specific. Don't take my chair. And then you had to get someone to second it. And if you could verify it when you came back, you only had a certain amount of time to get back, then things would happen. There was some pretty good scraps over chairs and positions by the TV.
If you had to do those dishes after supper, you'd hear upstairs just a ton of noise. And it's like a stickball game going on in the bedroom that was the biggest, and it was above the kitchen. So you wanted to get upstairs, and the lights were shaking and all kinds of stuff.
In the spring and summer, it went from a hockey rink to baseball or soccer or lacrosse, whatever the discipline was that particular part of the season or that year. Our backyard was small, but there was no grass on it because we were always playing.
There was lots of road hockey, there was hide and seek, and when we played hide and seek, you used the whole block, and we weren't, I look at the way some people are very protective of their kids and whatnot. I remember hiding on garage rooftops, and kids were no fear. We had no fear, right?
It was just crazy. We just, everybody was hockey crazy.
When we grew up, he used to rave about his kids playing out front of the house and would argue with the neighbors who said, can't let your kids play on the street, or, look at your front lawn, Floyd, you're a disgrace to the neighborhood. And Floyd would go, you know what, I'll raise the kids, you grow your grass.
I remember as the Charles Street Cougars, we would have some heated exchanges with some of the neighboring street hockey teams, and a fight or two broke out along the way, and so you absolutely did look out for your teammates and for your brothers and sisters, and it was a lot of fun, though, a lot of fun.
I think to this day we will all tell you we were undefeated.
We were awesome. We would take on all comers, and It was basically the Barretts next door, the Crawfords, a few other kids from around the neighborhood that we made honorary Cougars, and we used to make our own nets out of wood, and we'd lug these damn things across town.
Didn't matter what it was. There was always something going on. Whether we were playing little mini stick hockey upstairs on our knees with a rolled up sock and shooting it into the net and fighting over whether it went in or not.
You know, you had a lot of sibling rivalry. And as I look back on it, it's probably one of the reasons why, you know, I developed the way I did, because I had older brothers who I wanted to play with and wanted to hang out with, and I had younger brothers who wanted to hang out with me. So you got the best of both worlds. You got the push to be good, to play with the older guys, and you got the ability to just beat the crap out of the younger ones.
Everybody wanted to be better at everything than what your other brother or sister was. And you know, it wasn't really vied upon, but everybody knew deep down that you wanted to be better than your brother. You wanted to get a better accolade, and so you would just go out and do the things you needed to do to become better.
I think they all drove each other. I think that's part of it. I think there's always going to be a bit of a sibling rivalry, but also a sibling encouragement. And so, you know, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. She can do it, I can do it. So there was that aspect to it too.
Just everything. It could have been, you know, who's getting what seat at the table. You know, there was always something competition-based in our house.
I certainly had to break up a few fights, you know. Just, you know, scraps.
We're all kind of outgoing, and I think you need to be outgoing in a big family just so that you get heard.
The home competition itself absolutely prepared us for whatever we were going to face in life, whether it was in sports or the business world. And we knew that, you know, you don't get good at something unless you practice. And more importantly, you don't get good at something unless you have a passion for it.
I think everyone in our family, you know, has that personality type where we wanted to be successful on our own. You know, not just, we weren't going to ride on, you know, Floyd or Pauline's coattails. We were going to, you know, carve our own path.
We all quietly admired what each of us had in our qualities. And there was the compete level. There was a constant compete. And as I said, around the dinner table, there was a compete for that last piece of bread, you know. And whether you used your mind to get it or whether you used your brawn to get it, there was the compete.
There was motivation around the corner in that house probably all day long.
They pushed you, right? They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, a little more developed, you know, in their ability to play sport and to be successful at a discipline. So, you know, you would learn just by osmosis.
I do remember my brother Bobby being especially obsessed with improving his shot. In fact, he destroyed the doors of our garage practicing his shot.
Much like kids will shoot basketballs all day, you know, I found incredible joy in shooting pucks against this garage door. And, you know, it is what it is. I just love doing it, and I love looking at different parts of the garage and you know, being able to hit them, you know, with my shot, you know, close, far, you know, at will. And who knows how many shots I took, but it was just my thing. That some kids like to ride a bike, some kids like to, you know, draw. I love shooting the puck against the garage, and my hands are still sore now because of it.
It was a beautiful garage when we moved in 1967, but by about 1974, 73, it had seen its better days. We used to have the homemade wooden net, and we'd shoot pucks off of a plastic sheet that my father got. The guy that I would say actually put the death knell into the garage was my brother Bob, because he would be out there constantly just slapping pucks. And, you know, Bob wasn't very accurate, and he'd hit the garage a lot. And it, I believe, one day just fell.
It didn't matter to them that you know, we had a nice garage door or we had a nice front or back lawn. It mattered to them that their kids had the opportunity to grow up doing what they loved and be able to be kids.
You'd be up in a hallway that was maybe 3 foot by 3 foot, and you got 6 young, ambitious, competitive guys all trying to bat a wad of paper into a makeshift goal. And there were some hellacious body checks tossed out. I'm surprised that house is still standing.
They were always playing hockey out on the road, out on some rink somewhere, in the living room, in, wherever there was, a wide open space. They were always playing hockey, always practicing.
Tell people the toughest games we've ever played were in our backyard. So.
I think it's safe to say they were all completely dedicated to hockey. It was their first love. And let me tell you, if they weren't on your team, it wasn't much fun when they showed up, because you were going to take a stick across the shins if you thought you were taking something from them.
The way they were raised, in a big house on Charles Street, and you made your own fun. And I mean, hockey was automatic that they were going to play hockey.
The battles for the equipment on Saturday morning were fierce, right? Because you didn't want to be the one with the wet gear. And, you wanted the good pair of gloves, not the ones with the holes in them. And
I think there was a family that didn't have a large income, and sports was the outlet, and it was the way to go.
We didn't have much, but anybody was welcome in our house. And, growing up like that and looking for the best in people was something that, was just the way it was.
I just think that they were brought up that way. And if you ever talk to them, they have great manners. And they're good Canadian guys. They were never impressed with themselves. They were ordinary guys.
I think as children, you are always seeking your parents' approval for something. And my mother and father were, too busy a lot of times. I mean, they'd notice, okay, and they'd say, hey, way to go. But they wouldn't go overboard.
I think from top to bottom, in terms of just what they've done for the city, and as they've become part of the city, from the moment Floyd arrived in the 50s, I sometimes refer to them as the first family of hockey in Belleville.
I used to get very upset when people used to call me a Crawford, because I was Bob Crawford or Bobby Crawford back then. I wanted to become an individual, and I think all of us wanted that.
I think of Belleville when I think of the Crawfords. I think the two are as one, so to speak.
Everything in the wintertime was geared towards downtown. And the Memorial Arena was more about, it was like an old friend, It was like seeing an old friend.
It was the only rink in town at that time. And they'd be down there in various ways.
Well, their whole family was there from dawn till dusk, playing at various levels and probably playing at 2 or 3 levels.
It's more than an arena to me. It certainly feels like a second home.
I mean, I remember the Memorial before it had seats. It was just benches all around. But then they put the seats in around when I was probably 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that. And my mom sat in a single seat by the visitors' bench. I never asked her why she sat there, but I think she just liked the solitude of watching, and even at that day, I don't think she was someone that wanted to ever get involved in maybe minor hockey politics. She just was there to see her boys, and she liked the solitude of sitting in that single seat and watching the game. So you could always look over and have the comfort of seeing my mom there. She wasn't a yeller or a screamer or anything like that, but she watched pretty intently. And
I think her demeanor probably has a lot to do with their success, because Pauline was very calm and cool, and we'd be down at that rink on rep Sundays, and those Crawford boys could act up with the best of them out on the ice, and it never fazed her a bit.
She was the one that was the general, the operations person, made sure the bills got paid, made sure that there was, the things that most people did, to make sure our household ran well. But she upped it about 10 levels, because she was dealing with an incredible number of kids in an incredible competitive environment.
She was like a drill sergeant, really. She extremely well organized. How that woman managed that household, if they gave awards, she'd have the gold medal.
Well, Dad was away a lot, and so she basically, it was down to her to make sure, we, did our homework and, kept up with our schoolwork.
With 11 mouths to feed, the paycheck had to be spent judiciously, because, you had to go to the local Loblaws or whatever it was, and so you bought some day-old bread, okay, but you saved 10 cents a loaf. You bought the powdered milk and made powdered milk instead of having dairy bottled milk, just stuff like that. So just the sheer economic budgetary mastery that she had was just marvelous.
7 boys trying to maneuver them, she did it with her mind, and she knew what was right, and she knew the right way of doing things, and through trial and error, you educate yourself and you learn how to live your life.
She made sure my father knew where he was going, when he was going, and why he was going. They were a great team.
She's as close to a saint as I've ever met. Her kids were everything to her, to a point that, she quite often did nothing for herself. She's very selfless in that regard. She, whatever it was, like raising 9 kids and at times, having to raise my father as well, as an eternal teenager chasing hockey. She was the grounded, spiritual, and, she was just a fantastic lady.
We all knew about Floyd and his ferocious desire to compete and win, and we always just assumed the boys got it all from Floyd, but he doesn't call her his $1 million wife for nothing.
My father would, work 2 to 3 jobs while, trying to, maintain his love of coaching, and she made that possible for him.
My brothers Mark and Louis, I think, were the only 2 brothers ever to play against each other in a Memorial Cup final. That's pretty unusual, because back then Cornwall drafted their players from Ontario, but they played in the Quebec League. Well, it happened the one year, and Cornwall won that year. The next year, the Rangers won. So they each got their Memorial Cup.
The Royals ended up meeting Kitchener in the final. And Floyd Crawford, the father, was asked who he was cheering for. And he said, Cornwall all the way. Louis gets another shot next year. And guess what? Kitchener wins the Memorial Cup with Louis next year.
When we did get to the Memorial Cup, I know it was an emotional time for my parents. And Mark, he was on a straight beam line for the Cup. And unfortunately, I had to sit on the bench and watch. I think I got about 5 shifts that game. And it was a pleasure to watch, and they were a dominant team. And Floyd and Pauline were the first out, to congratulate me because of what had taken place, and then congratulated Mark. And again, no favoritisms. Just it's kind of tough to deal with both sides of the coin.
After the Royals won the Memorial Cup in Regina, that was a huge upset, beating the Peterborough Petes and winning it in overtime. And the team bus was outside after, and Floyd comes out and he's just ecstatic. And Floyd says, "I'm so happy, I might have another kid."
My sister Susie was always, we always looked at her as the brilliant one, incredibly smart, incredibly talented. Unfortunately for her, there weren't a lot of opportunities for girls in sports back then. I think if she had the opportunity, she would have been very similar to my sister Danielle. But women's sports just weren't at that point yet.
She was always a very adventurous soul. She went off to university, and then from there she bounced around Ottawa and Quebec, and then had a penchant for traveling across to Europe, and that's where she lives now, is in Rome. And my sister Susie's a really, really neat person.
My brother Peter, who's 2 years younger than I am, and he lives in Delaware now. He's a commodities broker, and he has been doing that for years and years. He went to States on a scholarship, a hockey scholarship, and ended up playing pro in the International League. And through that, he became a commodities broker, and he's still there.
I really enjoyed the game of hockey, and I was okay at it. I mean, I was very good at all aspects of the game. I wasn't great at any of them.
Peter wasn't a very fast skater. He was a very good skater, but he didn't have world-class speed. But he was had a world-class head and world-class hands. And when you're on a small rink in the backyard and you're playing against that, you learn a lot. I mean, Michael to this day is probably one of the best, unheralded high school athletes ever in Belleville. Everything he did, he was great at.
He was the smoothest skater. I mean, he was effortless. I used to sit there and marvel at how easy he could make skating look.
Michael was just good at everything. He was a really fast, strong, smart player. And to have those two guys to try to catch, because as brothers, you don't want to take a backseat to anybody. So that was a huge advantage for me.
Robert, who did very well in hockey, he was a very talented player, and played in the NHL for the Hartford Whalers. Then he was traded to the New York Rangers, and he finished his career in Washington. He lives in Connecticut, and he runs a large sort of sporting business with hockey rinks and hockey team.
Bobby is a great skater. He's probably the best skater of the bunch and fast, but you didn't watch him and go, oh my God, he's good. He gets called up to Junior B, and we're thinking, oh, now he's going to get it. Now he's going to play with men. And he's the best player on the ice.
We went to a tournament in a little town called St. Isidore up Eastern Ontario way. And we were short a couple of players that week, and the flu was going around. So Bobby played for us. And I remember he was our best player. And he was a year younger. And I remember there was a guy named Mike Willman and myself, and we were kind of the utility players. And I remember him and I looking at him and we go, thank God Bobby's a year younger than us, or we'd be out of a job.
I always remember my first game in Hartford. And I told people I should have retired after that game. It says everything about my relationship with Hartford and the community. We were playing Boston, and at the start of the game, obviously the game was sold out. Probably 70% of the people were cheering for Boston at the start of the game. And we fell behind, and one thing, the game progressed. We were losing, I think it was 3-2. I scored to make it 3-3, and then I scored again to win the game to make it 4-3. And seeing that crowd change from 30% Hartford fans, 70, to 70% Hartford fans, people being excited, to be associated with a winning team that could beat the Boston Bruins. I look back and, out of everything that I've done in hockey, playing in Hartford was the most rewarding thing that I had from a professional standpoint.
Mark was more intense, a tougher hockey player than Bobby. Bobby was a right winger, had all kinds of skills. Mark was more like his father.
Mark was a tremendous player. He was a Brian Sutter type individual. Wasn't incredibly fast. Wasn't incredibly, the most talented guy on the ice, but he was the strongest willed. A lot like Floyd. It would do whatever it took to win. Would figure a way to win.
Mark, when he hit you, you knew it. He was such a fierce competitor and not a dirty hockey player. His hits were all clean. He was, but like so many other Crawfords, he wanted to win.
And he was a left winger. I was a right winger. First time I'd ever played against him. And I remember back checking with him, on him, and thinking, because at that point I was one of the better players in the league. That year I had 50-some goals. And saying, maybe I'll let him go and give him a chance to go score a goal. And the puck went my way. And for a split second I thought, do I let him go and let him go in and score? Of course I didn't. I tripped him.
And the thing I remember about Mark was he always asked really good questions. He was very inquisitive and very curious. Mark is the ultimate optimist. That's why he's been a successful coach. You know, he's gets up every day, doesn't matter what comes his way, he's going to plug through it and find a way to be successful. He's got tremendous confidence in himself and his abilities.
But he was one of those guys you couldn't help but like. You know, even if the team was doing badly, he didn't get bad press. And he was very open and upfront with you. You know, that was the Crawford way.
We have a lot in common. I'll start right off that Mark was Coach of the Year in the American Hockey League, so was I. And Mark was Coach of the Year in the National Hockey League, so was I. So we have a lot in common.
They were a team of underachievers when they were in Quebec. When they came to Colorado, and with Mark's guidance and coaching, and the fact that a guy by the name of Patrick Waugh was his goaltender, you know, that was something.
Big time proud. I mean, you talked about the Crawford name on trophies. I mean, it's on the Stanley Cup. I mean, the holy grail of what we are all about, you know, hockey.
It really didn't hit home until later when he brought the trophy home, and you know, you see the sort of life that the trophy takes on.
My mom had this table and she put it out in the front step, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning. And it was actually before 8, I remember this. It was before 8 o'clock. And there we were, my mom and I, and maybe a couple of my nieces and nephews were around, my kids who were really young at the time. And there was the Stanley Cup and the covering that they have over the table, and there was some traffic going up and down Charles Street. So you'd see the people driving up, hey, that's the Stanley Cup. I can remember the guy across the street, Mike, the prison guard. Mike came over in his bathrobe, so it was wild. Like, people were coming out in their bathrobes to see the cup. People were coming from all the different families on our street to come over and see it, and it really was a special moment. I mean, it's the old cliche, you know, you play for the Stanley Cup when you're playing road hockey, and we did a lot play road hockey on Charles Street in Belleville, and to have it there and to be able to share it, first of all, with people that you grew up with was really, really special, and it was a great memory. I think the thing that sticks out for me the most was just the excitement in my mother. She didn't get excited very often. So that was really nice.
I tip my hat to my brother Mark. He did a wonderful job because he remembered all of his coaches growing up in Belleville, the neighbors, the Charles Street Cougars. He had them all over to our little party. It was quite special. I'm telling you what a wonderful, magic day. Louis was fearless. You know, anything that he wanted to try, he tried it. And, you know, some were good experiences, some were not. But Louis was full of energy.
Louis is, was known in the OHL when he played as a fighter. And that's kind of how I think of how he's kind of gone through life.
Louis, when he was younger, told me that, you know, he went out to play ball hockey and one of the neighborhood kids punched him in the nose, and he came in the house and was kind of sniffling a little bit. He was quite young, maybe 5 or 6, and Floyd helped clean him up and turned him around and said, well, your turn. And Louis got the message. You know, you give no quarter and you ask for none, and I'm sure all those guys learned that along the way.
He was trying to always catch up to Mark or Bobby, or you know, help Todd out, or Michael, myself, my sisters, and you know, he just tried very, very hard, and you know, through sheer willpower is how I would describe Lou.
If there's ever a story about a person who has tenacity and who has patience, it's Louis. Never drafted, you know, always the first one that, you know, people would look past when it came to being, you know, a player that was considered for the NHL. But again, the ultimate team player, was incredibly tough. I mean, Louis was 180 pounds soaking wet, and, you know, he was an enforcer taking on guys 240 pounds and being pretty successful at it. But
the single thing that runs right through the whole family, you're right, is that determination to do well and succeed. And Louis was a great example of a little bit of talent and a lot of sandpaper. There weren't too many guys that wouldn't do or go through a wall to succeed like Louis.
Back when he was playing for the Rochester Americans, would have been the early 80s, I guess, and Mark was playing in Fredericton, and off came the gloves when they were playing against each other. And in his interview after the game, Louis said, well, I've got a bunch of older brothers that, and I spent a lot of time out back behind the shed getting my business handed to me, and he goes, I don't think we'll be going back there for a while.
It was a very hard life, but he had a dream, and he can say he played in the National Hockey League and scored a couple of goals, and I look back, that was a incredible accomplishment because no one expected it except him.
I was a mess. I didn't really know what was going to take place. I had trouble finding employment. Did a lot of odd jobs, good with my hands, etc. And again, who comes to the rescue but Floyd? And says, I want you to go see a guy down in Belleville, Mav. Stop in for a coffee, shoot the breeze with him, see what happens. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, Louis, you played a long time, and you got something to offer the game. Go see what Mav has to say. So I did.
Louis is a smart guy. He knows how to get the best out of a kid. He knows how to, if a kid is fidgety, because that's kind of the way he was, a little bit of a late bloomer, distracted. So he sees potential. He's very good at noticing what each kid has to offer, and he'll get that out of a kid, and he knows how to do it.
And I think he's a tremendous coach because he has the passion, and that passion is what separates the good from the great.
If you worked hard for Louis and gave it all you had and were willing to go through the wall, he'd back you to the bitter end.
I treated everybody as family. They were, no input is not good with me. I like every part of input, good things and bad things, and filter it out. So that was the freedom that we had, and I thought that was a great part of the success that we had that really didn't get noticed.
4 or 5 of the boys were involved. Louis, as he said, as head coach, and then Mike was scouting, and Floyd was obviously overseeing the scouting operation. So from a standpoint of being a sports reporter whose beat was the Bulls, it was just incredible fun because you just felt like you knew those guys so well from having grown up here that it was almost like being part of the family. And it was like a family team, and Belleville was the extended family. And it really had that feeling coming to the rink those nights. It just felt like, hey, the Crawfords are running a team, but we're the rest of the family in an extended version. And who's coming to town that is going to try and beat the Bulls tonight? And you really did have that feeling. The Bulls got up 3-1 in the final over London, and I wrote a column suggesting that they were going to finish it off in Game 5 here. And I guaranteed a victory, and I don't know what I was doing guaranteeing a victory sitting in my chair. Well, those guys. So anyway, of course, they lost Game 5, and then they go to London, and London wins Game 6. So we're back here for Game 7. And but I remember after Game 6, and I traveled with the team in those days, and I got on the bus, and I was sitting next to Louis, and he had never said anything about the column. Very quiet about it. And then he kind of, so now all of a sudden the series is tied coming back here, Game 7, winner take all. And he goes, why would you write that column? And I said, geez, Louis, I just was convinced you were going to win. And he goes, so was I. And he said, but didn't you think they'd wallpaper their dressing room with that guarantee? And I go, yeah, I guess so. And then I thought this was great. Louis just kind of said, maybe I should have wallpapered ours with it. And that's all. He never said it again.
I was extremely proud of what they did. And when they won the Ontario Championship, and then they went on to the Memorial Cup and came within an eyelash of winning that.
Raises the cup and draws perhaps the loudest cheer.
They just want to say, look, Dad, Mom, this is what we did. We did what we set out to do, which was win the championship here for Belleville again.
For the first time in their 18-year history, the Belleville Bulls stand alone above all others in the Ontario Hockey League as the OHL champions.
Todd he's an amazing athlete, great runner, and as an NHL player, I used to think I was in excellent shape, and I remember coming home. I was about 22 or 23 years old, and I kind of led the Canucks at their training camp runs, and then I always prided myself on being a really good conditioned guy, and was a cross-country runner at high school in Nicholson and a whole bit. I came home one summer and ran with Todd, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's at a different level.
I wanted to be a hockey player. I'm not going to lie to you. Almost every kid that you grew up here in Belleville or anywhere in Canada that has ever had a stick in their hand wanted to be a hockey player. But I realized it fairly quick that I wasn't going to be on that same path. So I always knew that I wanted to do something. I wanted to make an impact, and it was really important for me to find something that I was really good at.
Todd was very vocal. He hated to lose. Still does. Loves to win.
And I always kind of had my father's accomplishment as my goal, to win a world championship or to get to the Olympics. That would be really something neat. And I ended up doing both. After track and field was over, I got into bobsledding. It's a perfect sport that you can transfer in without too much prior knowledge, and I ended up making the national team my first year. Went to 5 different world championships, and I went to 1 Olympics, and I won a world championship in 1997. So that was probably the highlight of my athletic career.
I was not a girly girl, did not want to do a whole lot of things that the other girls did. I was always out playing road hockey, and so I played many different sports and went to a lot of games to watch my brother.
I guess to describe Danielle is that she was an athlete on her own. And she was a great athlete. Baseball, soccer. She still plays soccer today, and quite competitive against 20-year-olds. Hockey. She was involved in sports, and basically all I can say about Danielle is, she's learned the competitive edge also, and she not only does it in the field of sports, she instills a lot of what Pauline had, where she used her brains.
The guys always told me if girls hockey had been more developed as it is now, when Danielle was a kid, probably would have played for the national women's team. And boy, you want to talk about competitive. She's as competitive as any of the boys in that family.
I definitely wasn't into wearing the dresses and whatnot, but yeah, there was, I guess, I've just heard the stories, when I came home, they were more or less, it's a girl.
Eric's 12 years younger than I, and I was in grade 7 when he was born. I think it was probably a great blessing for our family, because Eric is a lot younger than everybody else. And I think in a funny sort of way, it taught us all a little bit of responsibility, because all of us had to babysit. All of us had to really take care of him in some way, shape, or form.
He was a gifted hockey player. He was small. He had a fiery Irish gene. He played with a ton of passion. He played bigger than his physical stature.
And I remember him vividly playing for the Dukes. And he was a tiny guy. And nowadays, they probably would suspend you for many games. But Eric used to go, I would say 2 or 3 feet off the ground to hammer somebody into the boards, and it was fun to watch him do it. And if he got like a charging penalty for it, he was totally upset, because it wasn't charging, it was just the way he checked.
I didn't have to look far for heroes, right? I watched them play. I watched them all the way growing up, minor hockey into junior hockey in Cornwall or Kitchener or in Trenton or whatever with the Bobcats, and then go on to play in the professional ranks, whether it be at the American League or the NHL. And you know, certainly everyday kids don't get that opportunity, right?
I think it was hockey's in their blood, and it's hard to get that out. And coaching, after your playing career, coaching is the next move.
There's a lot of trying to impart your knowledge and help somebody else. And there's part of trying to convince somebody that they can do something. And you know, I always felt that both my parents were really good at those sorts of things.
I think they coach because they want to share the wealth. They enjoy it. They want to get into the aspect of sport any way they can.
We had those lessons early, and I think that they stay with you, and they become a fabric of who you become.
I don't care where you win a championship at, it is the absolute best feeling that you're ever going to have, because you know that you've set a goal, you've worked towards getting to that goal, and when you finally reach that pinnacle and you win it and you are the best, there's no feeling like it in the world.
People that are champions, they walk a little straighter, they walk a little taller. They have a presence about them that, you know, is it's special, right? And to have that legacy passed on from my father to his children, and hopefully it'll pass on to another generation from there. I think, you know, if you want to trace back where the genesis from, I would say it would probably be from there. You know, winning begets winning.
There's something about those guys, and you know, again, with the utmost respect, not many of them were the best player on their team, but as the stakes went up, as the ante increased, they had another gear none of us had.
We have a mutant gene that sometimes gets fired up, but that's just passion. That we all want to compete, we want to win.
We always wanted to show Mom and Dad that to be proud of us for what we do, and I think that had a lot to do with Floyd winning that championship here along with his teammates. And I know I wanted to do that. I wanted to perform well and say, "Look, Dad, look what I did. Look, Mom, look what I did."
Looking back on it now, I mean, there was a tremendous amount of talent in Belleville, and I think a lot of that has to do with the McFarlands and the interest with them, and all of those guys gave back to the minor hockey program in the community. They would put on clinics, and they'd coach. And so we got a little bit of an unfair advantage over some of the other cities around us.
There's hundreds of guys from my generation who've grown up and had the Crawford influence.
Floyd and guys that were with the McFarlands, they stayed with the game and they coached kids too and shared their expertise.
It's possible there's no OHL team here without the McFarlands. Without that foundation of a championship city and putting Belleville on the world map of hockey back in 1958 and 1959, who knows? All of a sudden, years later, Belleville was a viable site for a Tier 2 team. And then all of a sudden, Belleville was a viable site for an OHL team. I think it starts with those families, the Crawfords, the Hulls before them, and the Mahars too.
We didn't think we were exceptional, really, because it was just, that was us. That was our family.
They were well behaved. I know it sounds like a corny term, but and it goes back to the discipline Floyd probably had at home. We can't give you everything, guys. You're going to have to work for certain things in life, and that's the way they did it.
That's just the way we grew up. We recognize that we're unique, but nobody's I don't think, ever forgot where they came from, Nobody has a huge ego. We're all proud of each other, but, it's just the way it is.
All those guys were just ordinary guys, and I think that's one of the things in the brothers and that, if you meet them, they appreciate everything. That's what I liked about them.
It used to bother me that people would say, "Oh, you're a Crawford," right? No, I'm Bob Crawford. Well, as I'm older and wiser now, I'm a Crawford. I'm from Belleville, and extremely proud of that.